want to cool it down a little bit. And it's not going to be a fade, but I want to talk about Christian Kirk and his fit in the Cardinals offense. He's been a very polarizing fantasy name. You hear a lot of people saying that, Christian Kirk is just garbage. He's terrible. He sucks. His measurables are awful. We have other people that say, he's going to be a great deep threat option. We love the Cardinals offense. Kyler's so good. He's going to be able to sling it deep to him. So Kirk finishes the wide receiver 38 last year. He had a few blow-up games. There was one where he did have 3 touchdowns in one game, which is funny because those were the only 3 scores he had on the entire season. We know DeAndre Hopkins is now in Arizona. He's going to command volume as a no-question top 5 receiver in the NFL. And Hopkins has seen at least 150 targets over the last 5 years. So even if you don't think Hopkins can see that type of volume with a new offense, new system, you still have to have him in place for a huge target share. And I have conservatively projected for 135 targets, which is a 23% target share. And admittedly, I think that's low compared to the other projections that I've seen. And then Larry Fitzgerald saw 109.
This guy keeps going.
He saw 109 targets last year. That was one more target than Christian Kirk had. And Fitz has never seen less than 100 targets ever in his career since 2004. Like, this is unreal.
Is he ever going to stop?
I don't know, man. I think he's going for some crazy records here, but we have to expect him to continue. Like, I don't see any reason other than, yes, he's getting older, but he was old last year and he still saw 110 targets. So I expect him to get his in 2020. So what does that leave for Christian Kirk after Hopkins and Fitzgerald get their targets? Kirk saw, like I said, 108 targets last year. I think best case scenario for Kirk is for him to get close to 100 targets. I just don't expect him to get there. I have him around 90. As long as both Fitz and Hopkins are there, it's really hard to see where Kirk is going to see upside just from a volume standpoint. And Kirk leaves a lot to be desired in terms of his scoring ability, his usage in the red zone. He actually saw 11 red zone receptions, which was 9th in the league last year, but he only scored 3 touchdowns. Like I said, all of those came in one game. And again, Larry Legend passed him again with 4 touchdowns of his own on the season. And if you look at Player Profiler, Christian Kirk and Robert Woods are actually very similar from a measurables perspective. We all love Robert Woods this year. I'll be talking about him a little bit later on in this episode. But, that sounds like a good thing up front. But we have to remember Robert Woods' first 4 seasons in the league when he was with the Bills. He was efficient with the yardage and his catch rate was very good, but he was only getting 80 targets a year. He wasn't able to put up more than 3 or 4 touchdowns. That's just not a player that I want to invest in. I'm sure Hopkins will open things up for Kirk on the outside, but he's too boom bust. Out of all the deep threat boom guys like Marvin Jones, like Deontay Johnson, like Darius Slayton, Kirk is at the very, very bottom of that tier for me. And what's really soured Kirk for me in our home dynasty league is he's one of those guys, Alex, that I never know like when I'm going to start him, to the point that I'm worried that if I do start him and he busters out completely, he's going to burn me and actually have a negative impact on my fantasy season and my lineup. A third of Christian Kirk's games, again, this is last year when he was heavily relied upon in a fast-paced Cardinals offense. He was on the field for 98% of snaps. And a third of his games were absolute duds, less than 10 fantasy points. Like I just can't invest in that. You add in the injury history. He missed 7 games in 2 seasons already. I don't mind the flyer on Kirk, but he's the last of the tier and a guy I'm not going to have many shares of in 2020 just because I don't see a massive ceiling being there for Kirk at that ADP.
Yeah, dude, I'm right there with you. Like, it's interesting because I have him ranked exactly at his ADP right now, but I still get kind of disgusted whenever I have him on my roster. And it's like, Christian Kirk is the equivalent to a bag of pretzels. It's like you go get your lunch and there's all the chips sitting there and you got like your barbecue. This is a hot take. The salt and vinegar, all the good ones on one side, the ones that you love. And then you got the garbage ones like the weird mustard ranch and all that. And you're just like, I'm totally out on those. But like the safe option that really means nothing and tastes like nothing is the pretzels in the middle. Maybe get a little bit of salt in there. Congratulations. But it's like, you're not like thrilled about it and you're not upset about it, but you're like, it's fine. That's how I feel about Christian Kirk. If he's on my roster, I'm like, you know what, it's fine, but I'd rather take a risk and I could end up with something like a salt and vinegar. You don't really know how it's going to be, and then it ends up being amazing. So, around his ADP, like you said, I just don't get what the point is of drafting him because the ceiling's not there at all. And if I'm going for floor, I'd rather go with someone like a Jamison Crowder or a Golden Tate or somebody that I feel really steady and consistent about on a week-to-week basis. So for me, I'm kind of out on Christian Kirk. I haven't found him to be on any of my teams. And I love what you said about DeAndre Hopkins. And it's weird for me because a lot of people have talked about how DeAndre Hopkins actually takes a step back this season and he's not as valuable in fantasy because he goes from Deshaun Watson to Kyler Murray. And I'm just like, y'all are crazy. Even if you think Deshaun Watson's a better quarterback, which at this point in his career, he is until Kyler proves us otherwise, hopefully this season. But like Deshaun Watson's career high in attempts, I know he's only played like 2 full seasons, but it's 505. And I expect Kyler to push 600 this year. So even if Hopkins' target share is only 25%, if Kyler throws it 600 times, that's 150 targets. He had 150 targets in Houston last season, and it's from a quarterback that can throw the ball probably just as good, if not better, than Deshaun Watson. So, I look at this Cardinals team. I think there are the targets to go around. Pharaoh Cooper, Damiere Byrd, and Keyshawn Johnson combined for 121 targets last season. I think it's safe to say those guys will not combine for 121 targets this year. And imagine how good Kyler Murray is going to be when he's throwing to DeAndre Hopkins 121 times instead of those guys whose names I could have made up and no one would have noticed. So, I'm big on Hopkins. I have him right at that 150 target mark, like I said. And you said it best about Fitz. The 100 target thing, I came across that in my research as well, and it was nuts. I think this finally is the year. He is not at 100 targets, but look for Fitz to prove us wrong again. He's doing it time and time again. But I do still have Fitz at 80 to 90 targets. I think he will be involved, but he's not going to be a focal point of the offense like he has been in the past. So for me, it's like if I get Hopkins early second round, I'm thrilled, and I think his upside is there. But as far as Kirk and Fitzgerald go, I'm probably out. But all in all, I think this is going to be a great, fun receiving core for Kyler Murray and Cliff Kingsbury. And I'm expecting some big things out of the Cardinals this year. I think they're one of those teams that people have their eye on. Like I think about the Browns last season with all the hype going in, picking up Odell with the trade, things like that. It's kind of like the Cardinals of this year. Second-year quarterback. Is he going to take a step forward, gets a stud wide receiver? So we'll see what happens with the Cardinals. Hopefully it goes better than the Browns experiment. Sorry, Stef, but that's kind of how I'm thinking about this football team right now.
Yeah, I feel like for Christian Kirk, with how injured he's been, he's one injury away from Andy Isabella just coming in, having a few blow-up games, and just taking over.
Isabella was a second-round pick.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. Like, there's just nothing that makes me crazy about Kirk. Like, maybe if he had a really good measurables profile and we know he can create all this separation, maybe. But I'm just not seeing that for him. I need to see more. And he's off my draft board pretty much.